Mr. Garrison, glad you came. Sorry about the precautions. Well, I could give you a false name, but I won't. Just call me X. I'm not with the agency, Mr. Garrison, and I assume if you've come this far, what I have to say interests you. But I'm not going to name names or tell you who or what I represent, except to say that you're close. Closer than you think. Okay? Everything I'm going to tell you is classified, top secret. I was a soldier, Mr. Garrison. 2 wars. I was one of those secret guys in the Pentagon that supplies military hardware. Planes, bullets, rifles. Were what we call black operations. Black ops. Assassinations, coups d'etats, rigging elections, psych warfare, and so forth. In World War II, I was in Romania, Greece, Yugoslavia. I helped evacuate part of the Nazi intelligence apparatus just before the end of the war. We used those guys in the fight against the communists. In Italy, 48, we stole the elections. France, 49, broke the strikes. We overthrew Carino in the Philippines, Arbenz in Guatemala, Mozambique and Iran. We were in Vietnam in 54, Indonesia 58, Tibet 59. Got the Dalai Lama out. We were good. Very good. And we got into the Cuban thing, not so good. Set up all the bases for the invasion, supposed to take place in October 62. Khrushchev sends the missiles to resist the invasion, Kennedy doesn't invade, and we were standing out there with our dicks in the wind. You understand? A lot of very pissed off people. I'll come back to that later. So, 1963. This is September 63. I spent most of my time working on the Kennedy plan to remove all U.S. personnel from Vietnam by 1965. This plan was one of the most important, strongest documents ever issued by the Kennedy White House. It was National Security Action Memo 263 that ordered home the first 1,000 troops by Christmas. But then in November, 1 week after the murder of President Diem in Vietnam and 2 weeks before the assassination of our president, a strange thing happened to me. I was sent by my superior officer, we'll call him Y. I was sent by General Y to the South Pole as a military escort for a group of international VIPs. I was on my way back in New Zealand when the president was killed. Now, Oswald was charged with Tippett's murder at 7 p.m. Dallas time. That's 2 o'clock in the afternoon the next day, New Zealand time. But already their papers had the entire history of this unknown 24-year-old man, Oswald. Studio picture, detailed biographical data, Russian information, and we're pretty sure the fact that he killed the president alone, even though it took them 4 more hours before they even charged him with that crime in Dallas. Well, it looked to me as if a cover story was being put up, like we would in a black op. So, anyways, after I got back, I began to wonder, why was I, the chief of special ops, selected to go to the South Pole at that time to do a job that any number of others could have done? And I wondered if it could have been because one of my routine duties, had I been in Washington, would have been to arrange for additional security in Texas. So I decided to check it out. And sure enough, I found out that someone had told the 112th Military Intelligence Group at 4th Army Headquarters at Fort Sam Houston to stand down that day over the protests of the unit commander, Colonel Reich. This is significant because it is standard operating procedure, especially in a known hostile city like Dallas, to supplement the Secret Service. I mean, even if we had not allowed the bubble top to be removed from the limousine, we would have placed at least 100 to 200 agents on the sidewalks without question. Well, only a month earlier, UN Ambassador Adlai Stevenson was spit on and hit. There had already been several attempts on de Gaulle's life in France. We would have arrived days ahead of time, studied the route, checked all the buildings, never would have allowed all those wide open empty windows overlooking Dealey, never. We would have had our own snipers covering the area the minute a window went up. They'd have been on the radio. We'd have been watching the crowd. Packages, rolled up newspapers, never would have let a man open an umbrella along the way, never would have let that limousine slow down to 10 miles an hour, much less take that unusual curve at Houston and Alv. You would have felt an army presence on the streets that day. But none of this happened. It is a violation of the most basic protection codes we have, and it is the best indication yet of a massive plot in Dallas. Now, who best could have done this? Black ops, Mr. Garrison. People in my business. People like my superior officer could have called Colonel Reich and said, listen, we have another unit coming from so-and-so providing security. You'll stand down. I mean, that day, in fact, there were some individual Army intelligence people in Dallas. I'm still trying to figure out who and why. But they weren't protecting Lancer. And, of course, Oswald. Army Intel had a Harvey Lee Oswald on file. All those files have been destroyed. A lot of strange things were happening, and your Lee Harvey Oswald had nothing to do with them. We had the entire cabinet on a trip to the Far East. We had 1/3 of a combat division returning from Germany in the air above the United States at the time of the shooting. At 12:34 p.m., the entire telephone system in Washington went out for a solid hour, and on the plane back to Washington, word was radioed from the White House Situations Room to Lyndon Johnson that one man alone had performed the assassination. That sound like a bunch of coincidences to you, Mr. Garrison? Not for one moment. The cabinet was out of the country to get their perceptions out of the way. The troops were in the air for possible riot control. The phones went out to make sure the wrong story didn't spread in case anything went wrong with the plan. Nothing was left to chance. He could not be allowed to escape alive. Well, I never thought things were the same after that. Vietnam started for real. There was an era of, make-believe in the Pentagon and CIA. Those of us who had been in special ops from the beginning knew the Warren Commission was fiction. But there was something deeper, uglier. I know Alan Dulles very well. I've briefed him many a time in his house. But I still can't for the life of me figure out why he was selected to investigate Kennedy's murder, the man who had fired him. Dulles, by the way, was General Y's benefactor. I got out in '64, resigned my commission. Well, that's the most in question, right? Why? The how and the who is just scenery for the public. Oswald, Ruby, Cuba, the Mafia. Keeps them guessing like it's some sort of parlor game, prevents them from asking the most important question, why? Why was Kennedy killed? Who benefited? Who has the power to cover it up? Who? In 1961, right after the Bay of Pigs, but very few people know about this, all right? I participated in drawing up National Security Action Memos 55, 56, and 57. These are crucial documents classified top secret. But basically in them, Kennedy instructed General Lemonster, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, that from here on forward, the Joint Chiefs of Staff would be wholly responsible for all paramilitary covert action in peacetime. This essentially ended the reign of the CIA. Splintered it, as JFK promised he would, into 1,000 pieces, and now he was ordering the military to help him do it. This was unprecedented. I can't tell you the shockwaves this sent along the corridors of power in Washington. This, and of course the firing of Elwyn Dulles, Richard Bissell, and General Charles Cabell. All of them sacred cows in intel since World War II. You got some very upset people here. Kennedy's directives were never really implemented because of bureaucratic resistance. But one of the results was the Cuban operation was turned over to my department as Operation Mongoose. Mongoose was pure black ops. It was secretly based in the South Campus of Miami's University, which was the largest domestic CIA station, budgeted annually over hundreds of millions of dollars, 300 agents, 7,000 select Cubans, 50 fake business fronts for laundering money. They waged non-stop war against Castro, industrial sabotage, crop burnings, the works. And all this came under the control of General Y. All he did is take the rules of covert warfare we used abroad and brought them into this country. Now we had the people, the bases, the equipment, and the motivation. And don't underestimate the budget cuts that Kennedy called for in March of '63 either. Nearly 52 military installations and bases in 25 states, 21 overseas bases. You're talking big money. You know how many helicopters have been lost in Vietnam so far? Nearly 3,000. Well, who makes that? Bell Helicopter. Who owns Bell? Well, Bell was nearly bankrupt when the First National Bank of Boston approached the CIA about developing the helicopter for Indochina usage. How about the F-111 fighters? General Dynamics of Fort Worth, Texas. Who owns that? Find out the defense budget since the war began. 75 going on 100 billion. Nearly 200 billion will be spent before it's over. In 1949, it was 10 billion. no war, no money. The organizing principle of any society, Mr. Garrison, is for war. The authority of the state over its people resides in its war powers. And Kennedy wanted to end the Cold War in his second term. He wanted to call off the moon race in favor of cooperation with the Soviets. He signed a treaty with the Soviets to ban nuclear testing. He refused to invade Cuba in October '62, and he set out to withdraw from Vietnam. But all that ended on the 22nd of November, 1963. As early as 1961, they knew Kennedy was not going to go to war in Southeast Asia. Like Caesar, he is surrounded by enemies, and it has no face. But something is underway, yet everyone in the loop knows. Money's at stake. Big money. $100 billion. Kennedy brothers target voting districts for those defense dollars. They give TFX fighter contracts only to those counties that are going to make a difference in '64, and the people in the loop, they fight back their way. I think it started like that. In the wind. Defense contractors, big oil bankers, just conversation, nothing more. Then a call is made, perhaps by someone like my superior officer, General Y. Everything is centralized. No one has said he must die. There's been no vote taken, nothing's on paper, no one's to blame. It's as old as the crucifixion. A military firing squad. 5 bullets, 1 blank, no one's guilty. Because everyone in the power structure who knows anything has a plausible deniability. There are no compromising connections except at the most secret point. But what's paramount is that it must succeed. No matter how many die, no matter how much it costs, the perpetrators must be on the winning side and not subject to prosecution for anything by anyone. That is a coup d'etat. Kennedy announces the Texas trip in September. At that moment, Second Oswald start popping up all over Dallas, where they have the mayor and the cops in their pockets. General Y flies in the assassins. Maybe from a special camp we keep outside Athens, Greece. Pros. Maybe locals. Mafia. Cuban hire. Separate teams. Doesn't really matter who shot from what rooftop, right? Just part of the scenery. You know, I keep thinking about that day. Tuesday, November 26th, the day after they buried Kennedy. Lyndon Johnson signs National Security Action Memo 275, which essentially reverses Kennedy's new withdrawal policy and greenlights covert military action against North Vietnam, which provokes the Gulf of Tonkin incident. In that document lay the Vietnam War.